Hey guys, Pat here. So we're going to talk about Martin Scorsese's recent comments in this Hollywood Reporter article where he talked about Rotten Tomatoes and modern day film criticism in the internet age, in the box office, and how movies are made today. Here's a big quote they have at the top of the article. The legendary director is critical of the outsized influence of tomato meter ratings and CinemaScore grades, adding that good films by real filmmakers aren't made to be decoded, consumed, or instantly comprehended. He starts at the beginning about he has serious doubts that anyone misses the days when they were back in school and getting graded on their work. He talks about being in school when you get grades, when you're getting a B or a C or an A, and he doesn't like the arbitrary rating system. So what he's going to get into a little bit is film criticism. I think what he's saying is he misses the days of the Pauline Kaels or the Roger Eberts, where everybody who was a reviewer was also a hardcore cinephile, and everything they wrote had a lot of analysis in it, and they respected the filmmaker even if they didn't like the film. Whereas modern criticism, with the internet age and bloggers, you get a lot of people who review movies on a website or on YouTube that haven't seen a lot of movies, and they're just talking about their experience with the movie, and that's about as far as it goes, and they get better at it with experience. So Scorsese's problem is basically that we live in an age where that's the modern film critic, and he thinks a lot of films today, it's a celebration of hatred, of hate culture, that people just enjoy something getting negative reviews or negative press, and we don't actually spend time to analyze the films and respect them and see what the filmmaker was trying to do. So I'm going to break this down a little bit and give my thoughts on it and try to see where Scorsese's coming from. But this whole trend that's starting with filmmakers and a lot of people in the industry where they're starting to come after Rotten Tomatoes. And the argument basically seems to be that a film can't become a cult film anymore or be underrated or overrated because so many people review today, and you can get this collection of like 300 reviews of a movie to where it does make some kind of internet consensus that people play with. Where back in the day, it really wasn't that way. You didn't know if a film was getting great reviews across the board always. You didn't know if how good it was really doing. Now we know that stuff. We have the information. But before I get into this, what I would say mainly to that, to Scorsese's point, is that times are changing. It's the future. It's like anything else. Things are evolving. Film's changing. Music's changing. The way we do things is changing. So the standards for that stuff and how it's viewed is going to be different now too. And that's how it is with everything in the world. I get what he's talking about at some level, but it's really just the change of technology. We live in a different world now. So art's going to be different, and how we watch and view art, and how people talk about it. But I'm always up for criticism. I think criticism is one of the healthiest things for an artist. I think you need to be told what other people think about your work, if they think it's good or bad. Doesn't mean that it's good or bad to you or that they're right or wrong, but perspective's really helpful as long as you don't let them influence you too much. But every filmmaker seems to have a different way of going about it, and that's a very personal experience. Let's look at some of his specific things he said here so we can break them down. Sometimes when everyone is working together, test screenings can help answer some very basic questions. Was this piece of information clear enough to the audience? Was the timing right with the scene? I can just tell you from personal experience, when I make anything, like a short film or something, I show it to friends or family and ask them if this makes sense to them, and I don't overly explain it, and then they can tell me, like, yeah, that made sense, and then I know I got it right. So that's pretty basic stuff. I don't know if you need to have test screenings for that, but I guess the more people, the better, because they're not seeing it from just knowing you, they're seeing it from their point of view. But I always think that's healthy. I think in the editing process, you need to be as objective as possible. And a lot of filmmakers aren't objective with the editing and how they're putting the film together. They want to keep a lot of stuff they like, but sometimes you don't need that stuff. Or sometimes you cut things that were important because you had this idea. It's really tough. It's the hardest thing is figuring out what the final film's really going to be, because you have a lot of stuff and you don't always know how it's going to come together. And this is a struggle every filmmaker talks about endlessly in interviews. Is the film that gets made in the editing room, as apart from the film that gets made when you're shooting it. What is throwing the audience off at the moment, and why isn't it landing? Small, extremely specific issues can be clarified. And then, once the movie is made, there are the reviews. Like everyone else, I've received my share of positive and negative reviews. I'd say you've gotten a lot more positive in the recent years, but I see what you mean, Marty. The negative ones obviously aren't much fun, but they come with the territory. However, I will say that in the past, when some critics had problems with one of my pictures, they would generally respond in a thoughtful manner, with actual positions that they felt obliged to argue. Now, I totally get this point. I try to do with my channel where I come from a point of view of arguments. I don't always just sit there and go, hey, this thing didn't work for me. I didn't like this thing. This thing sucks. And I also try to offer suggestions to make the film better. What I think would make it better from a plot standpoint, from a filmmaking standpoint. Because what I notice with a lot of these critics now, these blogger critics, I guess, the movie nerd, like today, they talk about their subjective feelings on the film, which is fine. Films are subjective, but they never really add anything to the movie and really find a hook. A good film critic or good film analysis, which I'm not saying people don't have. There's a lot of good film. Rob Ager is a great example of a good channel, Collective Learning. When you do that, it's really discovering your abilities as a storyteller and how you interpret art and how you can deconstruct it and find new things. So all the time when I don't like a movie, I try to offer what I think would have made it a better movie, even though I don't know what went on behind the scenes or what always the director means, but you try to figure it out on your own. So I think I come with a level of respect. I've said very harsh things about filmmakers, but at the same time, I think, there is humor and hyperbole plays into reviews, just like they do into movies. There's a sensationalist aspect to it to be entertaining. So today, in the world of criticism, you kind of have to be that way. But I get what you're saying. There's a lot of film critics that don't have any depth to their reviews, and they just say a movie sucks or a movie's good, and that's what they leave it at. So people can watch it and get a confirmation bias or somewhat, instead of actually reading or getting into review. I really like the critic A.O. Scott, but I think that's because he does go into a lot of depth why he likes or dislikes a movie, even if I don't agree with him. So I think what you have to do is find the critics you agree with and not just look at the tomato meter or the generic arbitrary ratings like, oh, A minus, 8 out of 10, and really look at the substance of what the person's saying. And I think for the most part, everyone has something to say. They have something unique to add to it. It's just, some people are less interesting than others. But he's trying to say it was at a higher form back in the day. I think what he doesn't get is back in the day, there was less film critics. Less people had an opinion open in the world back then. He doesn't know what people were always saying when they came out of Mean Streets and Taxi Driver. He has no idea to know what everyone said. But in today's world, you do know on the internet what people would think about your movies. So it's different. You don't get to live in a bubble where you get to read the New Yorker or New York Times or the Chicago Tribune and you get to look at reviews there. There's reviews everywhere. And some of the people may be ill-informed and not know what they're talking about. That's certainly true. But if they didn't like your movie, they didn't like your movie. And that's kind of the thing with Mother. He gets into Mother here, Darren Aronofsky's film, and tries to defend it a little bit. And here's the thing with Mother. It wasn't liked by the critics too much. It wasn't hated. It got okay reviews. And it did horrible with audiences. And that doesn't mean it's a bad movie or won't do well later down the road. But, I mean, I don't really get Scorsese's point here. He's like, we should give Mother another chance. We shouldn't just enjoy that it's failing. It's like, well, of course we're taking pleasure in the failure. Aronofsky is a very pretentious guy in his life. He's very in your face about what he's doing. He said he wrote the script in a few days in a fever dream. He didn't say that he made it over a course of years and worked on it a long time. And like Black Swan, he worked on for years. The Wrestler, he worked on for years. This was a movie he kind of just slapped together. And Scorsese says that sometimes a filmmaker just has to make a movie. And you have to understand that. It doesn't always have to be good or bad. And I get that too. You have this need to make something. But that doesn't mean I have to like it and spend my time watching it. Like, I didn't like your movie Silence, and I love your work, and I sit there for 3 hours and watch that movie I didn't like. And I'm sure you thought that movie out for like 30 years? And I thought it was one of your worst movies. But that's how it is. You sit there, you're like, Jesus Christ, you contribute your time. So, I didn't know you're just supposed to, especially when you're going to pay money, you go to pay money to see these movies. You pay $10 or more to go see a film. I think you have a right to come back and talk about it. Now, maybe if you're watching online screeners, maybe that's different. But a lot of people, they go see the movie. Now, film critics getting paid, which is true. But that's the only reason they're getting paid is because enough people care about what they have to say. I guess it's complicated, but I don't think it's that complicated. So, over the past 20 years or so... Oh, wait, let me go up a little bit. I don't think I finished that. I will say in the past, when some critics had problems with my pictures, they would generally respond in a thoughtful manner. That's right, we already covered that. Over the past 20 years or so, many things have changed in cinema. Those changes have occurred at every level, from the way movies are made to the way they're seen and discussed. Many of these changes have an upside and a downside. That's true. For instance, digital technology has made it possible for young people to make movies in an immediate way. With complete independence, on the other hand, the disappearance of 35mm projection from the majority of first-run theaters is a real loss. There is another change that, I believe, has no upside whatsoever. It began back in the 80s when the box office started to mushroom into the obsession it is today. Now, someone who does a live stream every Sunday called Box Office Addict, where I obsess over box office numbers, I'm going to completely disagree with Scorsese here. I can get his point when he's getting to, but like this is like saying don't be into D&D, don't be into uh, fantasy football. Don't be into video games. Don't like. It's a hobby. People really like looking at the numbers. They like talking about them and predicting them and guessing opening weekends and all that. It's fun, and It made Hollywood a lot of money. I'm not saying the movies were better because of that, but it's not really a negative thing. I don't think it's negative. I think there's a lot of positives to thinking about the box office because it revealed that a lot of filmmakers were hacks. I think we're living in a world now where the industry's really hurting now, and it's their fault. They dropped narrative and they quit caring about telling stories as much as they did selling spectacle. I think it's a good thing. I have no issue with the world of celebrating the box office. A lot of people are like, "Oh, you just care about the money." It's not the money. It's the art of marketing and performance and making a movie that can hit audiences while also being a good film. There's a skill to that, not just making a good movie. There's the second part of making a movie, which is getting it out there and getting people to see it. There's an art in that itself that people are fascinated by, and I think you have to learn to become a successful filmmaker. If you don't have any success, if your movies don't make money, people don't care. Martin Scorsese's films made money. Okay, Taxi Driver made a lot of money. It cost like $3 million and made $28 million. He wasn't a bomb filmmaker. Some of his films didn't do well. Raging Bull didn't make a lot of money. But he was still a very acclaimed, successful director. That's what keeps you working a lot of the time. You either make money or people like you. That's the industry, and that's how it's been a long time. But that's, the idea seems to be that cinema is a greater art form than other things. But this is just what happens with all art. It turns into other things, and art expands. And then the internet creates art, and television starts doing things it couldn't do before that movies could do. Things change. Let's see. Okay. When I was young, box office reports were confined to industry journals like The Hollywood Reporter. Now I'm afraid that they've become everything box office is the undercurrent in almost all discussions of cinema. And frequently, it's more than just an undercurrent. The brutal judgmentalism that has made opening weekend grosses into a bloodthirsty spectator a spectator sport seems to have encouraged. I was just laughing. That's pretty good wording. Seems to have encouraged an even more brutal approach to film reviewing. I'm talking about market research firms like CinemaScore, which started in the late 70s. And then he talks about Rotten Tomatoes, which has absolutely nothing to do with real film criticism. See, I don't know. People always talk about Rotten Tomatoes. Rotten Tomatoes just takes all the reviews and does a percentage and then an average rating. And you click to see that, okay, 93% of critics like this, and the average rating was like an 8.2. And then you have all the reviews down there, sources that you can go read. I use Rotten Tomatoes to go look at the reviews, and I go read all the reviews. I don't just look at the tomato. I mean, he's right that people focus on the tomato meter, but that's like how they used to do back in the day. This movie has 4 stars, or it's a film festival film, and they always put the leaves around it in the trailers to let you know it's an art movie. It's marketing. That's all it is. It's to try and help a movie. Marketing's always... It's always been what's the hook to sell this movie on, going back to... Really, honestly, the beginning of cinema, it's what attracts people into the theater, and the challenge is you have to keep doing that after people keep saying a lot of the same things. And not everyone has interest in a certain kind of movie. Okay. He says, film criticism written by passionately engaged people with actual knowledge of film history has gradually faded from the scene. It seems like there are more and more voices out there engaged in pure judgmentalism, people who seem to be taking pleasure in seeing films and filmmakers rejected, dismissed, and in some cases ripped to shreds, not unlike the increasingly desperate and bloodthirsty crowd near the end of Darren Aronofsky's Mother. So, what Scorsese's talking about here a little bit is because he's a cinephile and he's probably modern living guys today, he's probably one of the top film historians, if not he's right there. So his knowledge of cinema is dense, as an older man who's been watching movies since he's a kid. So I get from his point of view, everyone else probably seems a little dumb, because maybe he understands things on a deeper level than we do. I get that. That there's something to that, but that's also a little bit egotistical, and it's kind of like, well, I get that way you think people, and I always argue that people don't know about movies and that, and I'll argue with people, but that's the game. I think that always happened. I think that was always what it was. I think it's just, it's people have more of a connection to the art today than they used to have, and that probably affects it. You're not wrong, but I don't know if we would have great television shows if that wasn't a thing. I think television getting so good was a response to that stuff in movies. The stuff that we were complaining about they could do in TV with long form storytelling. And then we got shows like The Wire and Deadwood and Sopranos. And that's, it really has changed a lot, just the landscape of basic storytelling structure and the rules that you were allowed to do. I mean, when Twin Peaks first came out in the early 90s, that was groundbreaking because it was such a cinematic show. Now that's the norm. That used to be weird. Before I actually saw Mother, I was extremely disturbed by all the severe judgments of it. Many people seem to want to define this film, box it in, wanting, and condemn it. And many seem to take joy in the fact that it received an F grade from CinemaScore. Yeah, I think I took joy in it. I think Jennifer Lawrence is pretentious and annoying and awful in interviews. I think Aronofsky is unbearable. I like Aronofsky as a filmmaker. I think the fact they put so much money into this and marketed it poorly and it all went bad. I mean, I didn't take joy in them failing because they all got paid millions of dollars. Jennifer Lawrence got paid $15 million. And her and Aronofsky are dating. I don't think they're unhappy with people not liking their movie. They're going to be fine. I mean, perspective does matter here. These aren't poor independent filmmakers. These are two rich people who live out in LA that walk around and get coffee and hold hands like a cute little couple. I don't think it's getting to them that much. Aronofsky's going to make another movie. His career's not over. I mean, what do you want to say? He made a movie people didn't like. Maybe people will like it later. But right now, people don't like it. That's what it is. I didn't like it. I don't think a lot of people liked it. I think it's going to take time to really... I mean, I thought it was obvious and bloated and ridiculous. I didn't think any of it was deep or worth analysis or anything like that. It was... I mean, to me, it was Darren Aronofsky basically going back to being a film student. I thought Pi was more... I thought Pi had more existential questions and things going on and better themes. Like his first movie that he made on a low budget, I thought was way more interesting than this. I thought he went backwards as a director. Like this is a film for me where I was like, well, this is a movie that if you're starting out maybe, but this is not. He should not be making stuff like this. I mean, this is. I know you guys are gonna get mad at me saying I'm comparing him to a student film, but a lot of that stuff is things that I've seen other people try. It's just that same kind of like, oh, she's gonna walk around the house for 10 minutes in one shot. It's like, yeah, I've seen this. This isn't amazing filmmaking to me. I guess maybe I don't get it. I'm not Martin Scorsese, I'll give you that. Okay, anyway, he said that actually became a news story. Mother had been slapped with the dreaded CinemaScore F rating, a terrible distinction that it shares with pictures directed by Robert Altman, Jane Campion, William Friedkin, and Steven Soderbergh. Who cares? I don't care if they're... I mean, I love Robert Altman and William Friedkin and Soderbergh, but I don't care if the film got... Like, the CinemaScore doesn't matter. Wolf of Wall Street got a C plus CinemaScore. It got a bad CinemaScore. It ended up making over $100 million because of the word of mouth and controversy. The CinemaScore didn't matter. You got a bad CinemaScore and your movie was still a hit. Sometimes a film gets a high CinemaScore, like an A-, and then it drops off really bad in its coming weekends. The CinemaScore is not always reliable and people don't always follow it. People like what they like and don't like what they like. It doesn't matter. It's like Rotten Tomatoes. Transformers gets terrible reviews and a movie opens and is a huge hit. And then another film will come out and have 98% on Rotten Tomatoes and it won't make a lot of money. I don't think people really care about what critics say. I mean, it has to be proven just by the box office. A lot of movies that make money get terrible reviews and people don't seem to care. So I don't really know if it matters what critics say. I don't think it ever did. I mean, you think the common audience member goes out and cares what this stuff is. Okay, let's see. He said, I was even more... Oh, sorry, I'm trying to find the next part. After I had a chance to see Mother, I was even more disturbed by the rush to judgment, and that's why I wanted to share my thoughts. People seem to be out for blood simply because the film couldn't be easily defined or interpreted or reduced to a two-word description. Well, I think I could reduce it down to a lot of two-word descriptions. Pure shit, ass cancer, pretentious crap. Like, there's a lot of... I think I could get it down to 2 words. I'll take that challenge. It's a horror movie, or a dark comedy, or a biblical allegory, or a cautionary fable about moral and environmental devastation, or a mess. It could just be a mess. Just throwing that out there. I don't think Aronofsky's Jodorowsky. It could just be a mess where the guy, he threw everything at the wall and it kind of missed. Maybe a little bit of all the above, but certainly not just any one of those neat categories. It is a picture that has to be. Is it a picture that has to be explained? What about the experience of watching Mother? Well, a lot of people didn't have a good time watching it. They hated watching it, which is what Aronofsky was going for. So I guess he succeeded in what he was trying to do. But then that's all it was. It was this experiment that went well. The subjective camera and the POV reverse angles always in motion. The sound design, which comes at the viewer from around corners and leads you deeper and deeper into the nightmare. The unfolding of the story, which very gradually becomes more and more upsetting as the film goes forward. The horror, the dark comedy, the biblical elements, the cautionary fable, they're all there. But they're elements in the total experience, which engulfs the characters and the viewers along with them. Only a true passionate filmmaker could have made this picture, which I'm still experiencing weeks after I saw it. Well, I think that's a wonderful review of Mother, and oh, Jesus Christ. You motherfuckers. Oh, Jesus. Anyway, I think that's a wonderful review of your feelings on Mother, but I don't think that means everyone else has to feel that way, and I can't think that all that stuff was obvious, and I got all of the allegories and everything he was saying from the Bible. Like, it didn't, oh, they're Adam and Eve, wow, deep. I mean, that stuff wasn't hard to interpret. It took me back to Noah, where everything he was doing was just confusing and messy, and it was the same crap, and it was, like, I'm not impressed by biblical allegories. Those are very, I mean, really? Talk about an overused trend in just literature and film is Bible. It's like, oh my god. And I guess I get what he means. There's that saying Tarantino talks about with Brian De Palma when he made Bonfire of the Vanities. That's a terrible film that only a great filmmaker could make. I get that sentiment. I don't think a lot of filmmakers could have made a movie as bad as Mother the way Aronofsky did. You have to have talent to make something truly horrible, just like you have to have talent to make something truly great. There's that weird balance between good and bad that every artist hits on one way or the other. And sometimes you get a Richard, is it Richard Kelly, who does Donnie Darko, and he's a talented guy, but he can't seem to figure it out. A lot of people like that. Aronofsky's kind of one of those guys. Sometimes he hits it, sometimes he doesn't. But he definitely has skill and imagination. Good films by real filmmakers aren't made to be decoded, consumed, or instantly comprehended. That's the thing I read at the beginning. Okay. They're just made because the person behind the camera had to make them. And as anyone familiar with the history of movies knows all too well, there's a very long list of titles: The Wizard of Oz, It's a Wonderful Life, Vertigo, and Point Blank, to name just a few, that were rejected on first release and went on to become classics. Tomato meter ratings at CinemaScore grades will be gone soon enough. Maybe they'll be muscled out by something even worse. Or maybe they'll fade away and dissolve in the light of a new spirit in film literacy. Meanwhile, passionately crafted pictures like Mother will continue to grow in our minds. See, now this is interesting because there's something with Scorsese I really agree about. Years ago, he talked about how Eyes Wide Shut grew on him because when that came out, a lot of people were mixed on it, said it was Kubrick's worst film, and it opened really well and died off. And then he kind of stuck with it a few years and was like, man, you kind of really get in that world, and I agree with him. First time I saw Eyes Wide Shut, I was disappointed too, but now that I've seen it more and more, I love it, and I think it's one of Kubrick's best films, not one of his weakest films. I think it's up at the high end of his film list, actually. I think he actually worked up a lot of years to accomplish something like that. It's almost pure Kubrick, that movie, more so than a lot of his other films. I think that go into a certain genre, that film is just Kubrick. It's just him being him. However, though, to say that, though, it's a different world now. It's easier to watch movies. Back then, if I wanted to go see a movie, I had to go see it in the theater. And then one day it came out on VHS and the picture quality looked bad. And then you had to wait years later to see it again. Nowadays, the movie comes out on Blu-ray. It looks amazing. You can watch it on Netflix. There's a lot of ways to see movies now that are just as engaging typically as the theater, or I find. And it's not like The Mother won't be considered great in 20, 30 years. I don't know. We're able to do analysis today. See, back in the day, the people who loved Blade Runner when it came out, because a lot of people did, they didn't all just get to come out and talk about how brilliant it was. There wasn't a culture then to have this niche for those small group of people. With the recent box office of Blade Runner 2049, we see that Blade Runner fan base is still really small. The people who actually love that movie is a lot of film critics and film buffs, but it's not a popular movie like a lot of other films. It's not a Star Wars or something like, not even close, really. And Blade Runner merchandise was really cheap to get for a long time until the DVD came out, and then everybody became a huge fan. A lot of movies are that way. It's not that, like, Mother has people who love it, and those people now, we know who they are, and they're probably going to love it 20 years from now. If you don't love it, you're probably not going to love it 20 years from now. It's not the same thing. It's easy now to go watch YouTube videos that break down every shot of the movie, all the meaning, or you can look at the production now. The curtain's really been pulled back from the Wizard, to use the Wizard of Oz analogy. You can see the wizard behind the curtain. The reason that Martin Scorsese still makes great films is because he's a great filmmaker. It doesn't matter how much information I have or what the tomato meter says. Martin Scorsese's films are they're guaranteed viewing for me no matter what because he's great. And I feel that way with a lot of directors. David Fincher, I feel that way with. David Lynch, Cary Fukunaga, Denis Villeneuve. There's a lot of directors I'll go see any movie they make. Edgar Wright, you know, it's because they make good movies, and those films hold up. You love them when you first see them, and then you love them later. There's a lot of films I've changed my mind on, but it's typically because I was young or in a different point of view when I saw it. I don't think it's that way anymore. I think that now what we find out is that okay, like in the internet now, if you have an audience, there's 7 billion people to find you. So like if 1 million people like you, they can find you today. That was a lot harder to do back in the old days. It was hard to find the people who liked you. You had to really try hard to get a cult status or something. Now it's easy to kind of get that. It's easy to find a mark. You find what you're good at. So that's all it is. Something like Mother is for a small audience. It always will be. And that audience is not mainstream, and it won't be 20 years from now. Just like Blade Runner's never going to be a mainstream thing, and it can't be. It's just not. People don't catch on in that way. It's not for everyone. And now we know what's not for people and what's for everyone, and it's a little easier to tell now because everyone can discuss it. That doesn't mean there's not a bunch of morons who are wrong and just saying stuff to be part of tribalistic and hateful, and they don't want to actually give insight. People give me that crap all the time. I get it, but at the end of the day, though, what I think Scorsese doesn't understand is that it's a broader world now to where we can look at foreign films. Now, I can watch any film now from the beginning of cinema to now easily. It used to be that you were only able to do that because you were able to get screeners of them and prints of them, and that's great. Now I can pretty much watch most movies. Now, there's still some that are hard to find, but with stuff like Criterion and all that, it's so easy to watch movies now. You can watch a film every day from all over the world. So your taste it's like music now. We listen to all music, so the value of something just being good isn't enough. I've seen a lot of masterpieces. I've watched a lot of films. So when I see something like Mother and it doesn't impress me, I think I go in with a certain knowledge and experience and understanding of cinema. And I feel like I did go in giving it a fair shot. And it's really kind of film that I should like. Honestly, I like those kinds of films. But, I don't know. It's what I don't like every Martin Scorsese film, and I've watched them all several times. It's what it is. But I don't think he was being rude here or being out of line. I don't think he was being silly or petty. I get his criticisms, but the problem is I think it might be an age thing, not trying to pull ageism, but in the world of the internet, it's just not the same. You know, listening to music now, it's not going to the record store and buying a record. It's listening to any song you want ever on an MP3 player. It's not going to the comic book store. It's getting a comic online. I know some people hate that, but that's what the world is. It's not getting a book at the library. It's getting it on your Kindle. It's not going to the theater to see a movie. It's watching 3 movies in one day. So things change. People want more. They want things quicker. They don't have patience today. And that's an issue, sure. But for those of us who are patient and love stuff, like I loved the new season of Twin Peaks by David Lynch, Mother just didn't do it for me. And I don't think it did it for many people, and I don't know why we can't ever just say, well, maybe a movie's bad. Scorsese seems to be saying that movies aren't good or bad, they just are. And you have to look at them for what they are as opposed to what they're, if you think they're good or bad. And that is ultimately true. They do just exist, like anything. But, I mean, sometimes you think a movie's crappy, and sometimes you think it's good. I think by that logic, we should just, okay, Transformers is good because it's what Michael Bay wanted it to be. I don't really go with that. I don't think that just because a guy accomplished what he wanted to do or he's good at what he's doing makes it a good movie or worth my time. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with me criticizing it and enjoying it fail when I don't like it. I shouldn't enjoy people being sad, but, it's... I don't know, it's comforting when when things go your way. That's just life. It's little victories. You get a bunch of little victories. If something goes well your day, you get some extra money. You get a free cup of coffee. The movie that you hate. I'm upset Blade Runner 2049 bombed. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm upset about it, and I'll get over it. And then I'll be happy if a movie I don't like, kind of... Even though I don't want people to lose money. But, it's just what it is. You got to get by on life like that. It's what keeps you going. But leave your opinion in the comment section. Like and subscribe. And please rewind your VHS tapes before you bring it back to the store. I don't want to have to do it,